My name is LaRee Westover. I began my walk in alternative and herbal medicines a little more than 40 years ago with the birth of my first son. Got into essential oils much later than that, probably 20 years later. I love essential oils. You will notice on the presentation the slide says the wonderful world of essential oils. That was because there were so many things that even though I knew herbal medicine and homeopathy and had become a foot zoner, there were things that I found oils would do that I hadn't been able to reach another way. So wonderful world of essential oils became the way I thought of essential oils. Now, this presentation today will cover some of the basics, not as much as I would like to, but that's a 4-hour or a 2-day presentation, depending on what we can get away with. So we'll start with some of the basics. The first question I like to ask a class, and I wish you were here to respond, is why do you use essential oils? What I learn from people is a wide variety of things, and what it usually boils down to is that they're using essential oils for healing, to make themselves feel better, to relieve pain. But for me, the reason to use an essential oil is because, like any alternative medicine, I can use them to heal and to make a difference, but I don't have the side effects of the drugs. So healing without the traditional side effects of drug therapies. Now, I'm not anti-doctor. I have great doctor friends and they've been a blessing to my life. But drugs have side effects, and I like to make a difference without using those. So let's start at the very basics. The first thing is your perspective on oil. 40 years ago or 20 years ago when I started into oil, I read everything I could get my hands on because that's who I am, but I don't speak any other languages. So everything I was reading was in the traditional English language, either from America or from England. Now that may not seem like much of a stretch, but what I found was that most of the books had a tremendous list of cautions. But if I read one that had been translated out of the German or out of the French, the whole essential oil world was completely different. For example, if you go into Germany, they pretty much do mostly aromatherapy. And there are many cultures that do that. If you go into France, the whole philosophy is kind of an anything goes sort of thing. They will use it for everything. They cook with it, they take it internally, they make it into things you can swallow, they make it into suppositories, anything goes in the French literature. But if you stick to just the things out of England or America, there was this long list of cautions. Most every essential oil that I would see demonstrated at shows and things had a don't use here and don't use there and don't use it at all. And as I studied why, I found that in both England and America, we have a vast love affair with laboratories. What they do is take it into a laboratory, break it down into its tiny little constituents, then test each constituent one by one, and then tell you what that oil will do based on this broken down, what I consider a drug, and they're just not accurate. Let me give you one example of that is myrrh oil. The literature will often say that myrrh is phototoxic. It will cause, if you have it on your skin and you go out into the sun, it will cause a burn. Some of the literature goes so far as to say that the burn will go deep into the muscle. I found that odd because in ancient Egypt, the princesses would make these little crown things out of beeswax and myrrh, essential oil, and that's what they wore on their heads so that as the day got hot and it began soft, they could reach up, touch that thing on their head, rub the oil on their faces and on their arms and any exposed area of the body as a sunscreen. So it made me wonder why myrrh oil was a sunscreen and the flavonoids separated out from the myrrh oil caused your skin to burn. And as I did further research over the years, I found that was true of so many oils. The cautions applied only to the broken down, not in whole form essential oil. That's true in the herbal world too, by the way, lobelia and other things of that nature. So that brings me to how safe are essential oils to use. Well, there's a couple of things you have to remember. Number one, they're very, very concentrated. A small 5 ml bottle of carrot seed oil is umpteen bushel of carrots distilled with just the oil. So a little bit's good. A drop or two is all you need. More than that could very well be too much, especially when working with children. Second thing you need to remember is that they are plant material. And just like every person out there somewhere is allergic to every plant known. And so you're going to have those people that are allergic to the conifers, those people that are allergic to the carrot. So you begin slow and you watch for those kinds of allergies. The third thing, and it's an odd thing, is that just sometimes in people's lives, they will react to an oil. My daughter, who worked with me in the business, never had a problem with ylang oil until she was pregnant the first time. And opening a bottle of ylang in her presence would immediately make her so lightheaded that it was either sit down or fall down. Surprisingly enough, it didn't happen with the last 4 pregnancies. Don't know if there was any connection. First pregnancy was her only boy. Don't know if there was a connection that way or not. But so you can often get a reaction to an oil. Well, not often, that's the wrong word. You can sometimes occasionally get an unexplained reaction to an oil. It's not serious. You simply stop using the oil. There are ways to balance the body with oil. My favorite is just to put Unity oil either on the feet or on the chest and on the back. That will seem to moderate. Unity oil works on all the chakras and all the meridians, and it seems to bring balance right back almost immediately, even if it's a rash. So the next thing about essential oils is that they work just like herbal remedies. The point of oils and the point of herbal remedies is to bring the body back into balance. And in order to do that, sometimes cleaning the liver, dumping gravel out of the gallbladder, there may be, cleaning the kidneys, there may be a healing reaction to an essential oil, especially if the philosophy is if a little's good, a lot's a lot better. A lot of people feel that way. And you may get a liver cleanse. You may end up with a gallstone dump. It's not often, and you survive it in a few hours, and you're way better when you're done than when you came in. But there is sometimes, occasionally, that reaction. So for the next couple of minutes, we're going to talk about some very basic and important things to know just when choosing an oil. So a lot of companies out there, a lot of different philosophies. How do you know when you've chosen an oil that actually works? Okay, just 2 or 3 things that you need to know. First of all, they need to be from plants. Now that seems like a no-brainer. How else would you get an oil if it wasn't from a plant? Well, we've become very sophisticated in our day and age, and we can almost duplicate anything. But the fact is, only God can make a tree. And when man makes a similar substance, there's always something not quite right. This is a chemistry lesson, and it's complicated, but basically you wind up with 1 or more little components of those molecules that's rotating in the wrong direction. Dextrorotation. And that changes the properties just enough to make it not a living thing. My favorite comparison for that is if I took a tree and chopped it into sawdust and turned it into presswood and painted a beautiful tree on it and hung some little presswood apples on it, it really wouldn't matter how beautiful they were. If you ate them, they would not be an apple. And that's the way it is in the essential oil world. If it is fake, it will not work as it should. And it might even be dangerous. In fact, most of the time it's dangerous. So the first thing to understand is that only unadulterated, that means they can't add stuff to it, Only those kinds of oils will be healing in the end. Second thing you need to watch for is to avoid oils that have a carrier oil added to them. Now we'll discuss carrier oils further in a minute, but basically a carrier oil is a larger protein molecule oil that we use with the carrier oils to, number one, make them less potent, less strong. And so you can get away with using 1 or 2 drops and cover the entire spine rather than needing 10 or 12. It makes these very concentrated essential oils safer to use. But the problem you have is because they have larger molecules, they tend to go rancid, they tend to break down faster, they don't have the shelf life of a pure essential oil. If your oil that you're buying is 70% 70% carrier and only 30% essential oil, that oil will have a limited shelf life. Some people say a year. I believe it's closer to about 6 to 10 weeks before it starts to break down, which makes, by the time they manufacture it, bottle it, market it, and you buy it and take it home, it's already lost a great deal of its most important healing effects. So carrier oils belong in their own little bottle, and the essential oils belong in their bottle, and you mix them as you use them and not before. So watch out for carrier oils already added. We'll talk about that further. And as we said, chemically altered perfume grade oils. So why would you do that? Why would you take an essential oil and add fake stuff to it? Well, that's a very simple explanation. Whenever you buy oil from one season to the next, a lavender oil will never be the same. It's so dependent on growing conditions, how moist it was, how when they harvested it, what time of day, if they hit the peak season, if they didn't. When you buy oil, you send for many samples and you pick the best one, but it's never exactly the same as last year's. You can't get away with that in the perfume industry. Somebody buys Chanel No. 5, she wants it to smell like, there cannot be a variation there. So chemically altering the oil will improve the aroma, but it's really hard on the healing properties. So I'm always leery of an oil. If I put it on my skin and I can still smell it 3 hours later, pretty safe bet that someone chemically altered it, because oils absorb, they metabolize into the skin, they're plant material. They just don't last forever. So let's talk about these carrier oils for a minute. Why use a carrier oil? Well, let's see. My husband likes to say that dumping some of those high frequency essential oils on your hot skin is like dumping rubbing alcohol on your hot tarmac out in your yard. It's just going to hit the air and not absorb in. And that's wonderful. That'll make the oil smell so good and your nose will be so happy. But those healing properties that you wanted to absorb into the skin didn't. They floated into the air. So we use a carrier oil to stabilize the oils that you're using. Some of the oils are low frequency. They absorb well without a carrier, but not very many. So carrier oils need to be kept in their own bottle and added a little bit in the palm of your hand, and then add 1 or 2 drops of your essential oil and then apply it to where you need it to be. So how would you detect an oil that has an added carrier? That's actually pretty easy. If you take just a plain sheet of paper and squirt your essential oil out onto the paper and wait a few minutes, the essential oil will color, if it has any color to the oil at all, but it will color the inside. It will make a spot, and then that oil, just like an oil slick going out over the ocean, will just spread further and further and further. You come back in an hour, the center of where the essential oil is has evaporated. It's left a little mark behind, but there's nothing to feel. But out around it, and that donut out around the outside edge will still feel oily, and it will feel oily in 2 days. And you can pretty much tell what % of that oil was essential oil and what wasn't by the size of that outside ring. So that's the easy part. It's harder to detect a chemical. That just takes experience, that takes smelling them. An essential oil, when you breathe it, should go up your nose, hit the olfactory bulb, spread out through your brain, drop into your chest, and just warm things. It should just, a chemical will not do that. It just lodges there in the olfactory bulb, gets hung up in the blood-brain barrier, and doesn't go anywhere else. So a little experience will pretty much tell you which is which. Shelf life of essential oils is something people ask me about often. There's a lot of hype out there in the world about how long an essential oil lasts. There are books and literature and companies that would tell you that you should replace all of your essential oils within 6 months. Some will say a year. It varies. Personally, I have some essential oils. I have a sandalwood that is at least 16 years old. It's stored in my sock drawer. No one gets to use it but me because I'm down to less than 5 mil. I estimate, as near as I can tell, that that's probably a 30-year-old oil. And it is absolutely phenomenal. Pure essential oils, they actually improve with age. They've pulled oils out of the tombs of Egypt that are ancient, that are absolutely wonderful. So why the hype about, mostly the wood oils are the ones that last best, the longest, but so why all the hype about replacing your essential oils that quickly? Well, the reason is, very simply, that those are the oils that have carrier oil added to them. That breaks down the essential oil molecule. Essential oils are very intelligent, and they see that carrier oil going rancid, and they will donate little pieces of their own molecular structure to keep that from happening until, well, yes, your oil doesn't go rancid as fast as it would have, but it also doesn't have the heating properties it should. So the best thing is to throw it out and start over with another adulterated carrier oil batch of oil. But a good oil should last forever, and that's true whether it's a single oil or a blend. When we moved our company from one place to another, I found a 4-ounce bottle of a blend that I estimated, judging by the label that was on it, had been back in that corner of that cupboard for about 6 years. And it was absolutely phenomenal. It had just melded and married and meshed till it was just beautiful. And we divided up in little bottles and let each employee have one. Couldn't really sell it because if my husband had sold it, then the next time you wanted one, you would have expected it to smell like that 6-year-old oil. There's no way that would have worked out. So shelf life of essential oils, they have a much longer shelf life than you would think. But there's some other explanations that you need here. One of the things that you need to understand that is in most of the world, England, France, Germany, India, wherever, the only thing they call an essential oil is a steam distilled oil. And those are the essential oils that will last forever. They're steam distilled. That's hot. They're going to be just fine if you heat them. They're going to be just fine if you freeze them. They're going to be just fine for a long, long time. Couple of cautions with them. When you heat something, it causes the molecules to move more quickly. So if you take the lid off your essential oil bottle when it's hot, some of those more volatile constituents are going to float right out the top. So no matter what kind of an oil it is, if you've had it in your car and it's overheated, bring it in, cool it down before you open it. That way it will last almost forever. Here in the United States, we call everything essential oils. In the rest of the world, they will differentiate the absolute oils, which are CO2 extracted or other extractions. They are much, much more sensitive to heat. That's why they don't steam distill them. They lose properties when they heat them. So these oils have got to be kept no hotter than an average room temperature typically. And they're the kind, even adding a drop or two to your tub, you want to be careful of how hot the water is. They are much, much more sensitive to heat. All essential oils are sensitive to light, which is why they're put in brown bottles, and they have that little stopper top on it to keep the little molecules from escaping. There's another class of what we call here in the United States essential oils. They do not call them that anywhere else in the world. They are the oils that are made from citruses. Citruses will not tolerate steam distillation. They are basically a cold-pressed oil, which means their molecules are much larger. They have a much smaller, a much shorter shelf life. Literature says 3 years. And I would hope that the company I started many years ago, which my husband now owns and operates, never sells you in a citrus oil that's older than a year. And if they do, it will be labeled as something to clean your cabinet fronts with because it works great. That way you have as long, it will be last year's crop so that you have as long as possible before there's problems with the oil. I think here again, I've got oils in my cupboard, but I don't use them medicinally. They're for cleaning things. Oil and orange and grapefruit and some of these oils make tremendous cleaners, but they do break down. They're almost in the class with a carrier oil as far as how far they break down. Okay, one other odd thing about essential oils, as I traveled with my oils in the early days, I would find that an oil that was in my purse, they run the purse through that airport security scanner. When I would get the oil back, and I don't even know how to explain that, you're going to think I'm wacky, but as I held it in my hand, it just didn't have any life. I don't know how to explain this to you except in energy terms. Some things have life and some things don't. Chemically produced things don't have that almost feel of life. So when you in the early days when I traveled with my essential oils and I would come through an airport security scanner and I would finally get to my seat and I would take my oil out and it just didn't seem to have that wonderful feeling, and I would think, well, so much, I've killed that bottle. But it seemed like by the time I'd gone a little ways, a few minutes down the road, that the oil almost developed that feeling of life again. It was many years later before I came across a book called Chemistry of Essential Oils Made Easy. Dr. Stewart wrote it, and he explained that as an oil or anything passes through a security scanner, those molecules are bombarded, but they're not all of them take a hit. And with pure essential oils, the fractured ones will donate their little molecular structures, broken pieces, to each other until they rebuild. It was his estimation that took about 20 to 30 minutes, which I found interesting because that's what I had found traveling with essential oils. Isn't it about 20 minutes I could sniff that dill oil to stabilize my blood sugar, or sniff a peppermint, a eucalyptus, a breezy, and clear my nasal passages, that they were back to working as they should. So something to think about in our day of security. There's no way an oil coming in from anywhere into any company is going to have passed through a security scanner right there in its drum or its 55-gallon drum or its 5-gallon bucket. It is going to have been security scanned. And it's amazing to me that God is so good that they just rebuild themselves. Made me speculate what an oil does in the body as it absorbs through my own tissues. Does it go along and repair cellular structures? Is that what we call metabolism, as the oil absorbs and metabolizes in the body? I don't know, something to think about. I would recommend that book, Chemistry of Essential Oils Made Simple to anybody. All right, fun part here. Getting to know your essential oils. When I first started out in essential oil, I watched a demonstration and was so impressed by what I'd seen that I immediately went out and bought books. Came running home and thought, okay, here's what I will do. I will learn essential oils. So I took the back of the schoolroom and I made this great big long poster out of butcher paper. And I put 10 oils, that was all I had and could afford, down one side, and I put a list of constituents of essential oils down along the top. And I started studying each oil individually. Started with lavender, peppermint was second, can't even remember, probably orange was third. And I started writing down the constituents across, okay, this one has sesquiterpenes. Oh, look, this one has monoterpenes. Oh, this one has. What I found by the time I had studied those first 10 oils is that every essential oil has a whole bunch of constituents, 200 or so that we can identify. And the main variation is the percentage of each one in there. So really knowing the constituents of an essential oil is only important with a few things like sesquiterpenes. The rest really, they all have them. All essential oils are antiviral, they're antifungal, they're antibacterial, most of them are antiparasitic, most of them contain the monoterpenes, most of them contain everything. And I put that word stimulant on the poster because most essential oils are very calming in small doses, but in large doses they're incredibly stimulating. So that even didn't tell me much. So what I found when I did that was I had a poster that didn't tell me anything of importance. So while it's fun to know some things about essential oils, and in larger, deeper classes where we go further into the chemistry, we teach you a little more about what a sesquiterpene is and what to watch for and what percentages to look for in certain oils. But that was not the most important thing to know about oil, although it was a really fun left brain study for a while. So what do we care about when we talk about things? Well, first thing I wanted to do was, like to cook. I thought, okay, learning how to make essential oil blends will be even funner than learning to cook. It was, but it was also rather expensive. So then I started studying from this version of notes. They say some oils have high notes and some oils have low notes and some oils have in between notes and some are called stabilizers, and that was fun. That was fun and educational. But if you pull a list of that off the web, you find that there are only a few that are really base notes and only a few that are really high notes. Most everything else is right there in the middle somewhere. Totally depends on, some of those middle notes will act as high notes if everything else in the blend is a base note. So that was a fun study too, but it still didn't tell me what I needed to know. The only thing it taught me was which oil to put into the blend first. If you put the high frequency note in first and then pour a dark oil like myrrh, for example, in on top, you lose all the top notes. They're not there anymore. So all that taught me was what order to put oils into a blend. But it was fun. So a way of blending essential oils. So then I thought, okay, by then my husband is saying, okay, this is getting a little bit boring. He says, I haven't seen anything but the top of your head for months now as you study. He says, let's remember oils are plants. And you've been doing herbs for 20 years. So let's look at them by plants. And that was the most amazing aha moment. It was like, okay, let's stop taking them apart in little pieces and figure out what the plant does. What I learned really fast is that throughout the world, if you use the Latin name of a plant rather than pigweed or whatever they want to call it, that the same medicinal properties are given a plant from one continent to another. And this is true in the literature, even before there was the World Wide Web, before that it stays pretty consistent all the way through. And the thing to pay attention to with a plant is, first of all, the plant structure. It took me a long time to really come to any understanding of what they call the vitalism of herbs. That where the plant grows, what shape its leaf is, rather it creeps along the ground or stands up like a pine tree, makes a difference to the medicinal properties of essential oils. And that the good oil books, the good herb books, whatever they are, understand that and tell you a lot about that. So that was the first thing I learned, is that I could learn about my essential oils exactly the same way as I had learned about my herbs, by taking into account things like environment and that word survival. I learned early on that an herb that grows on a dry side hill, that struggles for existence, will be an herb that will help me when I'm on a dry side hill and struggling for existence. And an herb who stands with its feet in water will almost always be a kidney herb. An herb whose structure internally is open and airy, much like the inside of a lung with its alveoli, will be a lung herb or breathing. And I found that same thing to be true of essential oils. And I finally began to think, okay, I'm getting a grip on this whole essential oil thing. So for me, an alphabetic list is the wrong way to look at an essential oil. You have to learn about the plant, where it grew, what it survived, what it's shaped like, what it looks like, even what color its flowers are. And that's called the law of signatures in the herbal world, and it's an amazing thing. So then we got, okay, let me give you one example of this law of signatures. One of my favorite herbs long before I knew essential oils, and now one of my favorite oils, is an herb called yarrow. It's Achilles milfolium. It was used even as long ago, even back in Roman times and during the Civil War, to staunch bleeding with a wound or to close a wound. And if you look at the plant itself, it looks like a fern, but it's not. It's not a member of the fern family. It is simply a plant whose leaves have been cut to the bone. You know, there's some things in Chinese medicine about it too, you know, third level of the blood and third level of tissue, which means it's a cellular structure rather than a skin thing. But some interesting things about it. But we learned early on that you could take yarrow, macerate it a little, and it would pull the sides of a wound together. And we found that when we used the oil that it did the same thing. And we'll show you some illustrations of that later. The last thing, and to me the most important thing to know about an oil, is which plant family it belongs to. Well, it's the second most important. One more screen in a minute. Because each plant family has its own characteristics. For example, if I want to build a blend for someone who is a little driven by the wind and tossed, their other people's opinions affect them way too quickly, or maybe they just, I don't know, they don't do well in the winter, lack of sunlight affects them, they're just don't seem to have a strong inner core, I will make the blend, at least the bottom notes will be predominantly conifers. And the reason for that, if you look at a pine tree, it's got its roots in the ground, it's got its head in the skies. So it's both grounded to earth and connected to heaven. And it's so strong in its inner core that it mostly grows pretty straight. It takes a lot of strong wind to make a pine tree grow crooked. And it also just survives the environment so well that it maintains its foliage and needles even in the winter. And even more importantly than that, it's so strong in itself that if you look under a pine tree, like you grow them in your yard, you will find under the pine tree no grass grows. But all the little plants and animals, the forest or in your yard, will tend to congregate there for protection from the elements. So when I blend with oils, and that's what I'm looking for, it's a pine tree or a spruce that I will use for that reason. So knowing the plant family that your oil comes from is one of the most important pieces. The last, and to me most important piece of knowing your oil, is to know what part of the plant or what growing cycle it came from. So stage of growth, there's a lot of difference between the energy of a seed oil and the energy of a flower. Energy and therapeutic properties will be different in the same plant depending on what part of the plant you have and what season it was harvested in. Just an example, the orange, first there's no seed of an orange made into an oil that I know of, so we'll have to skip that stage. But you have the twig and the branches of the orange. It's called petitgrain. And it has totally different properties than neroli, which is the blossom of the orange. And it has totally different properties than orange oil that is made from the fruit. And so it's incredibly important to know not just the plant, but what stage of its growth it is. So I haven't got time in this demonstration to cover too much. So here's one little illustration for you. They start as seeds, they become roots, they move around into the leaves or herbs or woods or resins, then they'll get a flower. A lot of traditions think the flower is the crowning glory of the plant. And while it's amazing and is usually high frequency and a great emotional herb, I consider the crowning glory the fruit, because the fruit is where the seed is. That's what completes its cycle and brings forth the next generation. So for me, that cycle isn't completed. The best plants are the ones that actually produce a fruit and move forward. So a couple of examples. If you look at it, it will say the woods are in the physical sphere, then have an astral sphere, and then back towards the basal sphere if you're into traditional Chinese medicine at all. So we'll do just a couple of them to kind of illustrate for you. So a seed. What is a seed? Well, it's kind of an inert little thing, but it has a lot of potential for growth. So that is what I will add to a blend for the purpose of potential. You have some little boy who struggles in school, struggles with his identity, struggles with feeling like he's going to be worth anything. The addition of a couple of seeds will bring that. It just kind of teaches him, yep, just like a seed, you're just beginning here. You have potential to grow into whatever you wish to be. And that can make a lot of difference. A willingness to grow. There's a lot of spices in this group. A lot of spices are made from seeds. Just need to know what is the season of it. So a lot of glandular and digestive oils are made from seeds also. So it's an earth energy. It's usually about mothering or nurturing, but it can be just about plain growth. So some of the things that I like about these people are that they're always creative and intuitive. They have a great ability to stay focused. So what if that energy isn't balanced? Then you have this person who isn't intuitive, isn't focused, and has no ability to sit still. A seed is required to stay in the same seed bed till he sprouts. And that's a tremendous piece of it. So in the next part, individuality, bring that up because a carrot seed just doesn't become an oak tree. You know, it's like it's a blend or an essential oil made with seed oils should have the ability to help them focus on who they are and who they want to be, not who some teacher wants them to be, not who focused on who they want to be. Love the seed oils. They are a lower note oil, so they go into a blend early on. Indications of need. They'll be overwhelmed, despondent, and depressed. They feel insecure. Why? Because they don't know who they are and who they're going to be, and they don't trust that they can be anything. I find a lot of self-pity as I work with people that I see from time to time. These are the kind of things I look for if I'm going to be building a blend just for them. So, full of self-pity, dissatisfied with where they are, inability to finish a project. Great starters. They have wonderful ideas, but they don't hang with them till they're done. And the opposite of that, of course, are the things you would expand. They find great joy in everyday experiences of life. They are continually looking ways to improve themselves and ways to improve the world around them. They are always seeking after something more beautiful, something to improve their lives. They become very sensitive to other people around them instead of protective. A little seed, it needs nourishing, it needs care, whereas as they emerge from that, they're able to care for other people. So the other example I'm going to use is the other end of the scale, and we kind of talked about it, the woods. When you hear that term heartwood, courage and a great heart is the main thing of this one too. They are firm and full of strength. They're grounded, as we talked about with the pine cones. I like them for commitment to a relationship, commitment to a cause, commitment to your faith, commitment to your own core values. Being able to stand for what you believe in, even though other people may think that's a little odd. Okay? Homeschool, for example, or doing holistic medicine or whatever it might be. I love the woods. I can usually tell if a person, I have them smell 10 oils, and there'll be some seeds, some woods, and some flowers. And by the time they've smelled 10 oils, I can tell which kind of oils they are going to like. And sometimes it's based on, oh, that makes me feel so much better. And sometimes it's that look of complete satisfaction. Rather they need it, or rather they've already achieved it. They will have a tendency to like particular kinds of oils. Myself, not much of a floral person, so I like the woods. Wood people are usually independent, bold, courageous, warm-hearted, unless they're out of balance, and then they're not. The woods are often used for heart problems, heart irregularities, and that's probably why I love them, because I have a long-standing heart condition that I live with very well. Indications of need would be exactly the opposite, only it's not so much that they're wimpy, it's that they've become overbearing, dominative, coercive, manipulators. They expect everybody to see the world from where they do. And often it's because they are taller, they are up there, they see more of the world, they see more of the big picture. But instead of teaching gently, they become argumentative, egotistical, a little. So some of the need for wood is because of the wimpiness, and some of it isn't. Some of it is more of this kind of thing. I love that. Feels alone in a battle against evil. Oh, that's so typical of people who need that wood energy. So, all right. So now we've had all these different things you need to know about essential oil. Are you discouraged yet? That was the way I felt at first, is that it's overwhelming. I will never know everything I want to know about essential oils. Of course, you pick up literature and it will tell you that you need to go to France for 7 years and take all these courses, studies, and you need, couldn't do that. Had a young family of small children, and most of them were accident prone. So that wasn't an option. But as I got into it, it was so exciting, and to start blend with them and start finding that they worked for things, that if I put something on a child's knee, the pain went away, and to find that these little blends I had made knowing practically nothing actually worked. And after 6 or 7 years, I kind of considered myself a bit of an expert. And the little company I had started had begun to grow, and my daughter had come home, and I'd hired one particular close friend who was with us for many years. But as we started hiring one more employee, and pretty soon there were 3 or 4 of them down there, and they're pouring oil every day. We didn't have any kind of a machine to do it, so they're sitting down there pouring oil from 16-ounce bottles into little bottles all day long. And the crop would come on in the fall, and we'd send out for samples, and they all wanted to play too. And so we made up a little sheet to smell and test and play in and wear and use, and they'd all come back with their little marked sheets. And what I found is that if an employee had been with me even just 6 months, 90% of the time her evaluation of essential oil was exactly the same as mine. If I picked up a chemical, so did they. If I picked up too much, plants grow in the wild, and sometimes you get weed material in your plant, and if there's too much of a different kind of energy to it, or whatever it might be, what I found is that these newbies had a very good nose. It was kind of humbling, because I thought I was the authority, and found out that these people were very, very good at it very, very soon. So my advice to people that learn oil is, yeah, read, study, do all that stuff, left brain it like I did, but no, just use the oil, smell them. Every time you go into a shop that has samples of oils, play in them, smell them, you will develop a nose very quickly, and you will know the good stuff from the bad stuff. You will know what works for you. Now, I mentioned that 90% of the time they agreed with me. What I found was that oils that are hormonal in nature, or endocrine system oils, there would be some variation. And if this makes you blush, I'm sorry, I'm a midwife of 25 years, nothing makes me blush. I found that depending on where the girls were in their cycle depended on which oil of that type they liked. There was a little play, and that caused us to sometimes purchase more than one oil and make our blends with more than one of the same oil because of where they had grown and the kind of properties that they had. I found that a fascinating piece, and I still believe it's true. That it's not so much the exact type of oil. Sometimes it's so specific that it depends on the plant and what its growing conditions were. And so there will be some variation in what one woman would consider, the very best absolute yarrow oil, and what another one would consider. And that makes the oil world exciting. It's like working with people instead of inanimate objects. It's fun. So develop your own nose as quickly as you can. People ask me all the time why I sold the company to my husband years ago. Why did I make so many blends? Why do I still make blends? It's because I find a blend will do things that a single will not. There are some singles that can be used alone. Eucalyptus, peppermint, lavender, they're they're just amazing, all to themselves. But I found if I made a blend, I could put in some low notes, I could put in some seeds, I could put in a wood, I could put in a flower, could top it off with just a little bit of a fruit. And I had the best emotional and physical characteristics all the way across the board. So it became just a joy to blend an oil for a specific person, a specific situation. So the oils that little company I started, for me, they were people. And eventually we started naming them after the people that we made them for, because we got tired of coming up with names. But they were that individual to me. The best illustration I can find for that is the picture that you see on the screen. Which would you rather sit down and eat? Each of those separate little ingredients of that cake, one by one. I mean, personally, I don't like straight butter. Don't even like straight sugar. And straight cocoa is really nasty. And baking powder, ooh. But made into a chocolate cake, it's a pretty amazing thing. So for me, blends are what I use. The term for that in the essential oil world is synergy. And that word basically just means that the sum of the whole is better than the sum of the parts. Doesn't matter, the parts may be wonderful, but put together they're even more amazing. And so I use mostly blends. I have to make a point of going back and studying or remembering what each single oil does, because I have to know that to make a blend. But for me, the blends are where to go. So besides, blending is fun. So, all right, essential oils. We'll talk a lot about physical characteristics in a moment, but I do not want to bypass the emotional segment of essential oils. In my opinion, in both herbal medicine and essential oils, one of the most important things, and it's especially true in homeopathy, is the emotion that drives the illness. When I began studying years ago, I did not want to know about the emotion. In fact, I threw several people off my porch with their Louise Hay book, because I did not want to hear that my kidney issues meant that I had more fear than faith in my life. Didn't want to know that. But the longer I worked with people and my own issues, I discovered that emotions play such a large part in things. And not always the negative emotions. Too much excitement, too much enthusiasm, just like your 2-year-old child isn't good for you either. So I look at essential oils. The first thing I look for is what is the emotional pattern of the oil. And it doesn't matter so much to me if in the description it doesn't talk about the gallbladder or doesn't talk about, a bruised bone. If the emotion matches the person, it's going to do as much good as anything else. So the first thing I look at is emotion. Now in the book I wrote, there's a section on emotions. I took that paper and I went through it and I marked them in different colors just to see, all right, how many essential oils would you really need to cover most of the basic emotions? Because most people can't afford. I love to blend. I got way carried away. There's so many blends. What would they really need to have a good basis of emotional oils? And in the Butterfly Express tradition, which are the ones that I originally made, I found that very physical oil, Millennia, which is supposed to move physical structures, I've seen it rotate a rib back into place. I've seen it line a broken arm. It's a very physical oil. But I found when I circled it in purple that it covered more than half of the emotions that I had listed there. So it became my #1 go-to blend for emotion. So what kind of emotion is this particular blend good for? I use it a lot with little boys with ADHD, and we'll talk about that further too, because I found that one of the things they needed most was that feeling of courage, that feeling of excitement, that feeling of I can do it. And that's the kind of thing that this oil does. It helps you with that feeling of integrity in your own core. So the second one I found showed up most often was a blend we called Heart Song. It was originally created for a little suicidal teenager. It became my #1 go-to oil for postpartum depression and almost any type of depression. Love that oil. I like to give it when there's been a loss in the family. It's an amazing, amazing grief oil. So from there, we went to the blend Tranquility. Tranquility is dark blue. There are very few oils that are dark blue. They contain an ingredient called camageline, and it isn't, how do I explain? It's not actually a part of the, it depends on the heat at which it's distilled. So you may have an oil that from a plant that isn't blue, and then you'll have another oil from the same plant that is kind of blue, and another oil from the same species of plant that is dark blue. It is completely a matter of how it was distilled. It takes higher heat to bring out camageline. What we found is that these dark blue oils, you find them in Roman chamomile, German chamomile. We found that these oils have a tremendous impact, a calming effect on the nerves. Eventually led to the creation of the blend Tranquility, which is a blend that is used to stop panic attacks. First time I actually had an opportunity to use it on a full-blown panic attack, I have to admit, middle of the night, it surprised even me. I had created it to do that. Tremendous oil for panic attacks, hyperventilation, any of that sort of thing brought on by an emotional trigger. Not the best oil for long-standing sexual abuse. I would have to put Angel in that category, but I would never use one without the other in that situation. So Tranquility became blend number 3. Believe and Beloved are very similar blends as far as what they do. The major difference is the aroma. Beloved is more flowery. So those two interchangeably will cover a lot of things that have to do with faith, with believing that the world is a good place and that you have a valuable place in it. So that's a general all-purpose oil that I love. Letting go is exactly what it says. It is an oil for letting go of the past, letting go of things you hang on to, which surprisingly enough makes it quite effective as an intestinal tract, large intestine oil. We won't go any further into that. Angel, I just mentioned, was a blend created for early childhood abuse. And that has been a tremendous oil. As I worked with people, I was so green sometimes, and I'd be sent into serious situations by stake presidents and other people. And I found inevitably, if I put Angel, either diffusing, rubbed it on their feet, didn't matter what I did with it, the lady would settle down and would very calmly talk about often the last place she felt safe, a grandmother. And I found that everything from foot zone, whatever we were working on, we were able to accomplish so much more because she felt safe. And it surprised me that an oil really could provide that feeling of safety. So Angel, we made one called Trust later on. It smells a little better, doesn't have some of the deeper note oils in it than Angel has. Benediction, listed in the middle of the screen, is an oil made for, if you believe in this, I certainly do, every living thing gives off energy, and not everyone gives off a positive energy. And if you work as a massage therapist or a foot zone therapist or any hands-on modality, sometimes you find that you walk away with the emotion and sometimes the physical ailment that person brought. I foot zoned long before I knew oil, and my husband used to comment that, well, they'll come with a cough, they'll leave without it, and you'll cough for 2 days. And I found that to be true. And so benediction was made as a way to protect myself from that kind of energy until I learned to have a strong enough core myself to stand against that. So benediction is literally for protection from energies that are maybe not what you want to carry home with you when you leave at the end of the day. My favorite screen, if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. And this is what I find oils diffused in the home. I used to diffuse Unity, the kitchen table, because it kept my boys from killing each other. Probably should reword that. It kept them from being argumentative and quarrelsome. There, we did better. We talked about, we're going to go system to system here in a minute and talk about oils, but I want to spend a little more time on the millennia we just mentioned. This one was actually created to kind of reset physical structures, to move things around in the body, working on a hip, not a hip, but a rib at the time. But what I found over the years is that this was one of the most important things I ever made for learning disabilities. ADHD, hyperactivity, ADD. I wish I'd had it sooner. Some of my children would have benefited from it sooner than I actually found it. This one, and I don't know, is it the emotional aspect because it's a very emotional oil, or does that same properties that make it realign a broken bone make it important for realigning energy structures, realigning nervous structures? I don't know, but this has been one of the most amazing things. I like to put it on, like mostly little boys is what I've worked with. I put it on their feet, and then I can put their socks and shoes back on and send them back to school, and they don't run around smelling like flowers. They don't smell like Ferdinand the Bull. That goes home with me, and they can. The best way to use it is to put it on in the morning, again at noon, and then at night, because it's plant material and it will metabolize, it will absorb into the body in about 3.5, 4 hours. And that way their afternoon at school is as good as their morning was. And do it again in the evening, then they've got a good homework shot. So that has been an amazing, amazing blend. So the question is always, was it because it was emotional or because it was physical? And sometimes I even consider maybe it was just because I told them they were amazing and they could do it and this would help them. But it turned out to be a very, very amazing thing with, for a lot of years, a lot of little boys. Essential oils for body systems and conditions. We'll just run one by one. And once again, I wish you were here asking questions because that's so much funner to teach to the question. So first thing I'd like to start with is asthma, because that was one of the first things that I had a little grandson born with some serious asthma conditions. And as we worked with the essential oils and tried to find ways to help with that, there are 2 blends that are for the respiratory system, 2 particular ones that I created. First one is Breezy. It contains a lot of eucalyptus, a lot of peppermint. It's a higher note oil. It's energizing, enthusiastic. I find that that is my favorite for asthma, and that surprises me because the other blend, Aspire, is deeper, goes deeper into the lung tissue. And I would have thought that Aspire would be more beneficial for a serious asthma attack. There's something about that peppermint, something about that eucalyptus, something about that excitement, that enthusiasm. I believe that asthma almost always has, if not an emotional cause, at least emotional triggers. That the asthma is brought on, I imagine, I've never had it, so I don't know, but if you can't breathe, or the feeling is that you can't breathe, there's going to be some emotion attached to that. And I've so many times found that even though the Aspire and the Breezy work for the asthma, you never really make the whole thing clear up. You never really make the whole thing go away until you find the emotional triggers and work with those, either with an oil or an energy modality. So Breezy or Aspire for the lung condition itself, the emotional oils for everything else that contributes to it. Speaking of asthma, how might you use the oil? Well, first of all, you're going to rub it on their chest, but please remember, carrier oil, drop or 2 of oil, you really don't need any more than that. Secondly, diffused, both the Aspire and the Breezy and the emotional oil could be diffused. One of my favorite ways, and I'll probably mention it 10,000 times before we're done here, is to add an essential oil to water. Water is probably the best carrier oil that you can come up with. So a drop or 2 in the tub, that's a wonderful thing to do with a brand new little baby with lungs that are struggling. What we find though is that water is an amplifier, not just a carrier oil. So please don't, if you get oil in your eye, don't wash it out with water. That will just make the situation worse. Milk is your best thing there. So asthma, I would put it on the chest. I would put it on the feet. Now maybe that stretches your credibility just a little, but there are studies out there that document vetiver, because it's so nasty tasting, put on the foot actually absorbs and can be tasted on the tongue within 20 minutes. So on the foot is an amazing way, even if you're not a foot zonist and don't think the feet can do everything, is a way to use oil. We'll talk about many ways to use an essential oil as we go along. So for asthma, put it on the chest, make sure they inhale some as they're going, and on the feet. Moving on, obstructive sleep apnea. Andy Griffith, Andy of Mayberry, that old film. I don't know if you remember looking at him. He had eyebrows that kind of tucked down into his head, into his eyes, and underneath his eyes were large bags. I don't know if I can say that or not, just did. Anyway, I worked with my dad who had a similar facial structure, and he also had what they called obstructive sleep apnea. So we set out to create a blend that would open those airways and strengthen those tissues. The result of that was a blend we called Wake Up? Good Night. It was called Good Night. And I had Dad dilute it with a little carrier oil, so just a little bit of it, and rub it across his cheekbones and just above his eyes. And we found that he slept better. He didn't have to have the oxygen they recommended. And that within just a short time of doing that, the tissues of the face actually tightened. My dad is now 90 years old, just got married last fall, still doesn't use oxygen. So an amazing thing. Except this was such a walk for me, one person at a time, trying to find things that worked. It's a fun thing. I would recommend learning to blend to everybody because it was just so much fun. It was just such a fun thing to do. So here again, when you're applying oils to the skin, especially around the eyes, use a carrier, 1 drop of oil, waste what extra you've gotten, make sure you dilute it. Same is true for children. Dilute, dilute, dilute. You just can't do enough. So respiratory system oils. Let's talk now about the integumentary system, however you pronounce that. Hair, skin, and nails. First thing I want to talk about is hair health. There is a blend called Delicate, yes, called Delicate, that contains many of the best oils for scalp and skin health, not just scalp. My favorite way to use that one is just to add a couple of drops to it when I wash my hair. As a prevention, you can do it just as putting the oil just in water and massaging it in without the shampoo. Sometimes we'll get a little further into the skin. But if you use it regularly in the shampoo, it seems to completely take care of anything called dandruff or dry skin or those little sores that are kind of a generational thing in my family to get on your scalp. Same thing is true for cradle cap. So what I would do with that is get the most emollient oil I could think of, like avocado oil or olive oil, put the Delicate in it, and soak that baby's scalp in it. And after it sat there for a while, a really soft bristle brush, and just brush gently. Don't try to get it all off. Don't make anybody bleed, you know. And then do it again. Do it 3 or 4 times a day until that little crusty stuff goes away. If you massage that baby's head with lavender oil or a gentle geranium, and you use a carrier oil, you'll never see those crusties anyway, but should you happen to, that's a pretty good way to get rid of it. Hair color. Literature says that Roman chamomile is the best for maintaining blonde hair color without any gray. I did that for a long time growing the Roman chamomile flowers and making a tea out of it. I found the essential oil to be much more effective at that. For darker hair, the recommendation is rosemary. No personal experience with it, but that's what they say. Want to talk about acne for just a minute. Acne is not really something you can do well with an essential oil, in my opinion. Yeah, you can have them wash their face with water with essential oil in it. You can have them dab the little things. If the problem is a blocked duct or a blocked pore, that will be very effective. But if you're talking teenagers, too often the acne is not a skin issue. The acne is the skin being used as an eliminative organ because their colon and kidneys are overwhelmed by their junk food diets. Now that's kind of brutal, but there you are. So when you work with someone with acne, you have to start deeper than that. You have to teach them to eat. You have to teach them to keep their bodies in tune. You have to start with the kidneys and the colon and the reproductive system, the hormones that are raging. And there are a lot of oils for doing that. For young women, there's a blend called Woman Wise that makes such a difference to the menstrual cycle and to the acne that they feel. Young men, that's a harder one. The blend Balance is probably your best, but I would use that very sparingly. I would go after the emotion, that teenage years, that, oh my, go for, here again, Millennia Oil, anything that makes them feel safe, secure, powerful, strong, excited about life, excited about learning, excited about doing. And then I would use the oils that support the digestive system, which we'll cover in a moment, the ones that support the kidneys. Rebuild from the inside out. Just the skin won't do it. If I were going to use one on the skin, it would be something like MelaPlus, anything with tea tree in it, anything cleansing of that nature. But those oils are very, very astringent. So I would be applying them a little bit at a time with a Q-tip, not all over the whole skin, because they're too drying to do that with. And with acne, you don't want to use a carrier oil because then you're just feeding those clogged pores things that they don't need. So water and emollient oils, I would alternate it with things like lavender and geranium so that the skin gets some emollient factors from the less severe oils. Millennia oil on the feet for the little boys because they don't like smelling like oil. For girls, the Woman Wise has not the world's best aroma, but it's not offensive. If they'll put it on first thing in the morning, I have them rub it on the abdomen because that's by far and away the best place. The aroma will pretty much dissipate by the time they arrive at school. Of course, if they're in the middle of cramping and carrying on, they don't care how they smell, so I would just use it a lot. I find it in the tub or in the shower. Surprisingly enough, essential oils, because of their aromatic qualities, work just as well in the shower as in the tub. I just put the plug in, let the water get about 2 inches deep, add a couple of drops of oil to it. It absorbs through the pores of the feet, it absorbs from the steam of the shower. It's a tremendous way to use oil and doesn't leave the body smelling strongly of oil. Scarring, one of my favorite uses for essential oils is scar tissue. Vitamin E oil, most vitamin E is made from wheat germ oil, and that's tremendous. Do watch out for the man-made fakes. The side of your vitamin E oil jar will say D-alpha tocopherol if it's a natural. It will say D-L-alpha tocopherol if it's a man-made, wrongly left dextro-rotating oil. Those are useless. They're useless nutritionally, they're useless for scarring. So once again, D-alpha tocopherol is what you're looking for. Scarring, essential oils for scarring, predominantly lavender and geranium, although we did make a blend years ago called Valley for my husband's scarring from his severe burns. Found some amazing effects with things like Baby Me. Even internally, a story from the old midwife days, had a woman with a placenta that was pulling away, had a donut hole in the middle. We applied Baby Me oil to her abdomen, and within 6 weeks, the placenta had readhered. Now that's an anecdotal thing. Maybe it would have done it anyway, maybe. But I have seen that Baby Me oil handle scarring from C-section scars, stretch marks with pregnant women. I've seen it handle some pretty nasty scars consistently. Sago Lily is another blend made for a massage therapy school. That handles scarring very well too. Any carrier oil, the more emollient the better, so the carrier oil blend or an olive oil. Vitamin E oil, as I said, is my favorite for dealing with scarring. So moving on, skin-wise, sunburn and other burns. Lavender, you can't beat lavender. There's no way to beat lavender. In our personal experience here, burns seem to be a family tradition back several generations. We've seen some very severe burns and have handled them using essential oils and the other holistic modalities. You just can't beat lavender. And you'll have to take this into legal advisement and delete this or not as you wish. My lawyer says we're fine. Check with your own. So I'm not too old. My fourth son is 16. I pull up the driveway one day and my son is standing on the front lawn with his leg in my garbage can. Now, I don't know about your garbage cans, but even if you keep a bag in them, that is not a sanitary environment. As I come up the driveway, he stands up on the little folding chair next to it and lifts his leg out of the garbage can, and the sight was frightening. Severely burned. He'd been carrying a gasoline bucket that had a gasoline can with a little hole in it and had soaked his Levi's with gasoline. Then, being impatient and waiting for his dad, he had decided in the scrapyard we owned at the time to light a cutting torch and cut some iron while he was waiting. Bottom line, it was his pant leg went up in flame. My husband doused him with cold water that was up there. They stripped the clothes off him and brought him home. They tried to put him in the bathtub, but he went into shock, so they put him out on the lawn where it was warmer on that hot July day. And that's where he was when I came home 2 hours later. The only thing they had done for it was dump lavender oil in it, in that garbage can. Healed beautifully, healed with no scarring. We kept his leg in a clean garbage can. We retired that one. And kept his leg for about 36 hours, and then we created an herbal salve laced with lavender and geranium and different things that we applied to his leg with sterile gauze pads and waited for it to heal. Worried myself sick that we'd wind up with a doctor's visit that we couldn't afford because of infection. I mean, after all, it started out in a garbage can, right? No infection, not one little spot of infection. The only thing I can tell you is that as a mother, as I would dress it, I would think, okay, now if I was at the burn center, they'd be scraping off all this burned skin. Felt wrong, so I didn't do it. Never scraped anything away whatsoever, and watched that leg heal beautifully. It grows hair. It's an absolutely normal, perfect leg. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say essential oils, even that mild little emollient lavender, are antibacterial. They really do work that way. And if that gets me in legal trouble, so be it. So, the next skin thing, we've actually treated far more severe burns than that leg in our time. Oh my, the stories we could tell. So wrinkles, this is my favorite little picture about wrinkles. I love this one. Wrinkles as far as essential oils. This gives me an opportunity to talk to you about a group of oils called sesquiterpenes. They are good for many things as a constituent of essential oils. One of the major things that they do is repair cellular structure, which is what a wrinkle is, right? Breaking down of the tissue of the face. My favorite in that category is frankincense, and we now have a lot of frankincenses available to us on the market. There are 4 that I'm personally familiar with, and 3 of them I put in a blend years ago called About Face, and that is a wonderful blend for anything skin condition. My second favorite screen about wrinkles is right there. I don't even mind having them as long as they're where I smile and not where I scowl. So, frankincense oils contain a constituent called sesquiterpenes, which all the literature from way back will tell you crosses into the blood-brain barrier. If you don't know anything about that, you should study it. Basically, the blood-brain barrier, like the placenta, is supposed to keep toxins and poisons from crossing in to delicate tissues. They do a sort of a job. In our day and age, chemists have been so effective at creating small molecule, nature imitating toxic poisons that they're not as effective as they used to be. But I find as a midwife a lot of things cross the placenta that they claim don't, and I think the same thing happens in our brain. But sesquiterpenes are supposed to cross the blood-brain barrier. The literature says they clean up things in there and help things grow. The thing that amazes me about frankincense is that it only has, in the very best frankincense, about 8% sesquiterpenes. Now, a cedar wood has far higher, up in the 80s. Sandalwood is way up there too. But as far as going into the brain, when there has been any kind of a brain injury, one of my sons did that one too. My kids used to say that don't let mom read a new book because then we'll have to one of us do it so she can practice on it. Pretty much true. We found that frankincense did more to relieve the pain, did more to clear the thinking, did more to help with the healing than any other thing that we used. And I think the key to frankincense, as near as I can tell, is, yep, the sesquiterpenes carry into the blood-brain barrier, but it's the other ingredients in frankincense that carry it there. And frankincense has a worldwide reputation for handling anything in the head that goes on. Tremendous oil, even though it only has 8% sesquiterpenes instead of, I immediately, when I studied sesquiterpenes, thought, oh goody, my sandalwood wins the race. But it just doesn't do the same things that frankincense does. So this is an illustration of ways in which to use yarrow on a cut. We talked about yarrow oil a few minutes ago, cut to the bone. It's an amazing thing. I knew this happened with the yarrow herb if you macerated it and applied it to a cut. But to watch the essential oil in work, this is what I do when I see a cut. Take those little butterfly bandages, pull the edges together, get it just as tight as I possibly can, whether it's 1/4 inch or 2 inches or whatever we have. And then because the essential oil will break down the adhesive, you can't just indiscriminately dump the oil on it. So I will put the yarrow oil on a Band-Aid, on a Q-tip, and place it one little bit at a time along the cut where there is no adhesive on the Band-Aid. And do that frequently. I have seen amazing cuts pull together with absolutely no scarring. One of the few times I use the essential oil straight, because the carrier oil, being the large molecule oil it is and not being, it may contaminate the site, may introduce an infection, so I do not use the carrier oil there. Just the straight oil. Incredible the things we have seen with that sort of thing, and very little scarring. There is more than one type of yarrow. They're both Achilles milfolium. One is blue and one is green. There's even a yellow yarrow, which is best for fevers. Here there's quite a bit of discussion. I think the blue yarrow with the chamazoline is far and away stronger for pulling together cuts. My husband, who's had far more cuts than I have, claims the green one is the best. So for me, the green one has more properties that would indicate it for use with hormonal issues. We've used it for fibroid tumors during a pregnancy. That was an amazing story. I prefer the blue one, but for a long time we only had green, and it was very effective until we discovered the blue one. So whatever, either one or the other, but applied straight. Don't let the oil get under the sticky part, because then it will come off and then your cut will separate again, and that will be nasty. So we'll move on to digestive system oils. Digestive system. Where does the digestive system start? Starts in the mouth, right? Okay, we'll get there in a minute. All right, stomach ache. Here's an interesting one. Because oils are antibacterial and anti-everything, you might put an oil on because you have pain, and the pain may feel gassy, or it may be crampy, or it may be whatever it is. By using a blended oil, you have antibacterials everywhere, but you have antispasmodics, you have pain relievers, anodynes, and you have everything you need all in one oil. My two favorite blends that we created for this was Inside Out, was the first one we created. I don't even think it smells good, but every time I tweak it, it smells worse and works worse, so we keep it the way it is. That one will relieve the stomach cramping. I think it's strong enough to help with the bacterial part of a flu. Love that one. Eventually, an employee of mine in those days created a blend she named Easy Traveler. And it has good oils for upset tummy, but it's more of an emotional oil. Her fear of traveling was what drove the creation of that oil, as her husband was taking her on a traveling event. Tremendous oil for those butterflies in the stomach that you get just before you have to speak in front of a camera or whatever it might be. So that was a good one. Later on, I had a little grandbaby born. Interesting situation. Won't bore you with the midwifery, but basically we developed in the process a little bit of an umbilical hernia. And she had a lot of gas. She would pull her little stomach up into her little feet up into her stomach and just scream. And so we did what we always do. We tried alternative first, Found the Millennia oil was very effective, and I created a little blend called Julia for her. Her name is Julia. So I found it to be amazing as I went into the blending room. Sometimes when you go in to make an oil, you sit down with the books and you construct it one little left brain piece at a time. And other times you go in there and you sit down and the little bottles are just shouting, pick me, pick me. That was the way it was with Julia. I just, within seconds, knew exactly what to put in, what proportion, and just did it. I thought, well, it's for Julia. I never really expected that we'd ever market it in any way. Eventually, my husband wanted to try it out, so I sold it to Butterfly Express, all rights, lights, and they tell me that it's a tremendous oil, and I've found it for myself for anything that contains gas pains, anything that gassy, burpy pain feeling. So that was kind of a fun day for me. Scary day, fun day, as we worked with that little child. She's now 6. So cavities, we said the digestive system starts in the mouth. Cavities, first blend I created for that was called Refreshment. Liked it, used it for years, like straight spearmint for anything gum or tooth related. Eventually, just following the muscle test, I began to use Tendicare personally. Tendicare is an oil for muscle and tendons. I have no idea why it works for mouth. I was using, I had a gum disease going on and didn't like the dentist version. And so I started washing, just put a couple of drops in a little bathroom cup and added a couple of mouthfuls of water and squished it around in my mouth. That was 6 or 7 years ago. No sign of gum disease, and I've not had a cavity since either. One tiny little one on the side of my tooth. When I hadn't been doing it for about a year, I got right faithful again real fast. So I don't know, one anecdotal story, but that's my recommendation is Tendicare. A lot of people use Deliverance, a drop on their toothbrush or rinsing their mouth with it. Seems to have the same effect on the gums, but it's also a great, Deliverance is probably the strongest antibacterial, antiviral blend that I've ever created. And an employee of mine that I had here for 15 years did it every day forever and missed one day of work in all those years, and that was after a dentist appointment. They didn't, it's a complicated story, you don't need to know, but she just swore that solved everything. As long as you did that with oil every day, you didn't have to worry about what was going on and whose feet you zoned. And so, tremendous way to deal with things. Next thing I want to talk about is eating disorders. And there are several of those. I find the emotion behind most of them has to do with perception, the way the person sees themselves. And pica, the eating of non-nutritive stuff, anorexia, bulimia, whatever it might be, all the literature and my personal experience tells me that grapefruit is your best oil for any kind of eating disorder whatsoever. I like to use it, as always, in a blend, the grapefruit, because then I can tailor make it to whatever person I'm dealing with, but anything with grapefruit. So that would be, in Butterfly Express terms, sunburst, purify, if it has grapefruit in it, it probably would be effective for that. Liver disorders, fatty liver, so much fatty liver. Fatty liver is a new term for not quite cirrhosis of the liver, almost, but not quite. Medically, they will tell you it's a very serious disease and that the Mayo Clinic claims 20% of the adult population suffers from fatty liver disease. Statistically, from the people that I see, I think it's higher than that. I have seen fatty liver diagnosis, hospital medical diagnosis, in people as young as 12. I think this is a serious, serious problem. Brought on by our diet, the way we live. So I don't know what it's brought on by, but there's a section in there under the single oil called Ledum, that explains fatty liver, what the symptoms are, what the causes are, as near as I could. Ledum is the number one single oil in the world for that. Ledum is tremendously strong. I have never recommended using it singly until a week ago, and it worked out very well. I like it in the blend. It's in the blend Livin', and that gives you kidney support. It gives you colon support at the same time as you're dealing with that liver situation. So that's something contributes to diabetes, contributes to insulin resistance, contributes to so many things, obesity, weight issues. So that might be worth a serious study and read, as it is becoming such a common thing. Here again, emotions of the digestive system. What might they be? I don't know. Fear of things, inability to let go of past stressors, inability to accept nutrients, accept support, accept support from the people around you are the ones I find to be the most common. Moving on, urinary tract infections, UTIs. Best oils for those, here again, are anything astringent, and I find the citrus oils are usually very good for that. We did create a blend called Reflections for that, which seems to be helpful. My favorite cure for urinary tract infections is herbal, anything antibacterial, and cranberries. So bedwetting is another situation that I think responds very well to essential oils. And the reason it responds to essential oils is because there's really only two causes for bedwetting. The first is structural, and the second is emotional. Near as I can tell, a good foot zone will identify the structural one, or you can ask a doctor. The emotional one, diffusing an oil in the bedroom at night, is so effective. And what oil would you use? I would start with Heart Song, try Millennia, try Dreams. There's so many. I've seen bedwetting in kids whose fathers work away from home or travel a lot. I've seen bedwetting. If it isn't structural, you're going to have to find the emotional driver behind it. And because you put the oil on the child, but often just diffused in their room is the best way to deal with that. So, possible emotions. As you can see from those little signs poking up, just about any emotion on earth will hit the kidney. Fear, depression, worry, stress, panic, you name them, they'll all be part of any kidney thing. So what is it that our little children have to fear that would bring on a bedwetting situation? I don't know how school was for you, but that's a lot of stress. And these computer games they watch, the shows they watch, I'm surprised with my little grandchildren, even the cartoons they watch. I don't know, what a fear-ridden world we've created for our children to survive in. So, all right, next part is oils for the heart or the circulation system. Before we do circulatory, let's take a look at the heart for just a moment. Daily workload accomplished by the heart. 6 quarts of blood in a typical body pushed around the body 1,000 times per day. That's a lot of work. I don't know of a mechanical pump on earth that could handle that for the length of time we expect of our heart. So oils for the circulatory system. The best heart oil is Vitality in the Butterfly Express tradition. I actually created that one for myself for a serious heart thing I had going on way back then. There are other oils for circulation, although Vitality will do it. Solitude, here again the blue ones. Any Millennia, Tranquility, Solitude, anything with that chemagiline in it is going to protect and strengthen the veins. How to use it? I rubbed so much Vitality on my chest, I still can't stand the aroma. But very effective, very effective. Otherwise, whenever you're working with veins and arteries, you should move up the body. So if varicose veins for the legs, you would dilute the oil, start at the feet and work upwards, always working upwards, not the other way around. Tub is a good place, shower is a good place. So circulatory oils. Endocrine system oils. Oh my, how many glands and organs do we have in an endocrine system? So we're going to spend just a little time, break them apart just a little bit. The number one blend for endocrine system that I have ever created is Endo Relief, because it has just a little bit of something for everything. Right, so we'll start there. Hormones, they're part of the endocrine system. What is a hormone? A hormone is a messenger for the endocrine system. When we say hormones, we are typically thinking, most people, about reproductive type hormones. That is such a small part of the puzzle. When you're balancing hormones in women or men both, you have to play pancreas, you have to, pituitary, you have to work all the way around. The main thing I want to say first and foremost about hormones is it's possible to balance your hormones. That is what should be. I guess I was just fortunate. I had a grandmother, maybe she had something to do with it. Every time you passed her house, she was stuffing something nutritional down you. For a while, it was the B vitamins and nutritional yeast, and then it was, my hormones seemed to start out in pretty good space. And what I learned as a midwife over all those years is that hormones and nutrition go hand in hand. Now, rather an essential oil being plant material absorbing into the body provides nutrition is not something I can find a study to back up, but it makes so much sense. It just does. And I have found that as you work with hormones, the whole nutrition things changes in the thyroid, it changes all over. So balanced hormones are achievable. So I debated on putting this slide in. Here it is. I don't know that it has to be that way. And I think if it is, rather you're a young woman, premenstrual syndrome, young father in our area had his young son ask him what PMS meant. His definition was pretty mean stuff. And I thought that about summed it up, but I don't think it has to be that way. It just doesn't need to be, nor does menopause have to be awful. I've worked with women who've done that, and for myself and for the women I know, it wasn't that big a deal. Okay, it shouldn't be. So what are the oils for this? And we mentioned Woman Wise for younger women. Balance is the blend for older women. It is also the blend for men. Are men hormonal? Yes. Okay. Different set of hormones, and we don't get to track their monthly cycles as well. So, but yes, they are. And as you go into your older years, I firmly believe you're meant to be well and happy and energetic into your advanced years. I watch my father. He is a good holistic practitioner. He is 90. He will be 91 in 2 weeks. Got married in August. And drives himself wherever he wants to go and travels and goes on. He's a tremendous man. And I believe it was what he knew about nutrition, what he knows about holistic remedies. It's been a tremendous thing to watch, this man. So meant to be well and happy and energetic into our advanced years. I believe that. I probably would not rely just on essential oils. There are some herbal remedies. Dr. Christopher has some. Butterfly Express has some. There are a lot of them about that will also help with the nutrition of balancing hormones. All right, so how to use them for this particular topic. We're talking about hormones and balance. Any way you can think of. Aroma may not be the very best way, because I would want the oil to absorb into the body. So applying it with a carrier oil, using it in the tub, using it in a shower, just massaging it on, any way that you can would be an acceptable way to use it. On what? I like the feet, and I can stick it in my shoes. But menstrual cramps, I would probably add, first put the Woman Wise on with a carrier oil on the abdomen, and then layer some deeper on just for some extra pain relief. Anything antispasmodic or anodyne, just for the pain relief. And that would be the same thing with a woman with hot flashes. In menopause, the ovaries are no longer producing what's needed. That is done by other organs. So I might probably apply that to the chest, pituitary, thyroid area, rather than to the abdomen. But it's only a matter of time. It's going to go everywhere anyway, so doesn't really make a lot of difference to me. If I'm working with a tendon or a muscle, yeah, I'm very specific where the oil goes. You want it on the muscle or tendon you're targeting. But internal organs, no, doesn't really matter. Okay? Adrenal burnout. 4 phases of adrenal burnout. That first one, wired for sound. I loved this thing because for so much of my life, I didn't realize that hyper mode, those people that are so driven and get so much done, that is the first stage of adrenal burnout. That's what sets them up for the rest of the stage. The time to deal with adrenal burnout is right there. And some of that is lifestyle choices, choosing to rest, but it also helps if you can diffuse an oil and they actually sleep instead of lay there planning the next 2 years' activities all at the same time. So, yeah, adrenal burnout begins right there. The second one, wired and tired, that is where we begin to recognize adrenal burnout. They're still hyper as can be, they just don't have the energy to push forward. And there's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of impatience with the people around them that aren't moving as fast as they would be if they weren't so dead. That's a hard stage. The second one, that's what I'm talking about there, the wired and tired. They move from tired to frustrated and angry. And then the last stage of adrenal burnout is the just plain tired. Okay. Here again, endo relief is probably your very, very best thing that you can do for that. But targeting the adrenals alone, where are the adrenal glands? Adrenal glands sit over the top of the kidneys. Okay, let's get over. And so that is typically where I will put the endo relief when I do that, is right there over the kidneys on the back, although diffusing the oil works tremendously too. Now, this is my personal opinion, but the adrenal burnout people that I have worked with most, there has always been a liver component to it. And oils like Livin and Revitalize and Energy seem to be a big component of the adrenal burnout. Maybe they're just supplying the energy or the nutrients they need, but I would use those, the energy. Deliverance has a lot of that same cinnamon-based oils in it. So adrenal burnout, that's a harsh one to live with and a fairly easy one to fix if they'll change their diet and their lifestyle just a little while they're at it. Blood sugar issues. Blood sugar issues. Here again, endo relief because it's endocrine, but an odd little fact is dill oil, and mostly the aroma. I rarely put it on people because they don't like to smell like a dill pickle. But I carry a dill in my purse all the time because hyperglycemia is a family tradition. And if I do go a long stretch of time, 6 or 7 hours for some stupid reason, without eating, I find the dill oil buys me an extra hour or two, just the aroma of it. As a midwife, I found that fascinating. What do pregnant women crave? Dill pickles, stabilizing of the blood sugar. I love that one. So that's what I do for that. This next slide shows a picture of healthy bone and osteoporotic bone. Your bones are kind of like calcium banks. The controlling issue of that is the parathyroid, which is an endocrine gland. So when I work with osteoporosis, I always target those parathyroids that sit on the thyroid gland and are very interesting. There's a lot of stories I could tell about people having parathyroids 2 removed. If they remove all 4, you die. And then having bone fractures over the next few years as their bones become more brittle. Here again, rub the oil in, that endocrine oil on your throat. It's also that endo relief is a great thing when you're coming down with a cold. There's just a million uses for it, and I just almost feel the warm fuzzies every time I use it for something. I think, oh goody, bone mass, wonderful, more bone mass. So treat the bones well, and that's an endocrine system thing. Also helps if your body absorbs calcium and other nutrients. One of the things we found, and it's anecdotal, although there are some studies out of Sweden that indicate that the use of essential oils alters how your digestive system absorbs nutrients. My favorite one for that is a blend we made called Eternity, and that's what it was designed to do, and seems to in the people that have passed through here. And you know, loosely, because it is loosely, they show up here and they have medical tests telling them that they don't absorb certain nutrients, and we work with the energy system and with the essential oils, and 8 months later when they're done with their series of classes, that nutrient absorption has changed tremendously. And I find the same thing working as a midwife with failure to thrive babies, that you help the mother absorb nutrients, her milk is better, and the baby, you help him absorb nutrients. Tremendous change that you see just almost suddenly. So absorption of nutrients, if you don't put the right stuff in, it doesn't matter how well you absorb it. How would I use the Eternity? On the feet, on the abdomen, in the tub. Same answer all the way, isn't it? Yeah, I like to, with babies particularly, I like a drop or two in the tub whenever you bath them. It just absorbs in so well. Okay, internal consumption of essential oils is advocated by a lot of companies. That is something that frightens me to death, all right? Unless you've cut the oil with a carrier, there is simply too much plant material in one place to hit the digestive system safely. And if you study the literature, the only real serious poisonings with essential oils, the few that there are in the literature, were with children and the consumption of essential oils. There's just no need. If an oil will move from your toe to your tongue that fast, that oil rubbed on the body will go where you need it. It does not need to pass through your digestive system. And number one, it doesn't really need to be broken down by your digestive system before your body utilizes it. Your body knows what to do with it best. Do we never ever, under my roof, use essential oils internally? Well, I can't claim that, because I live a long ways from a grocery store, and if I'm making salsa and the cilantro has gone slimy, I will use a drop or two of cilantro oil. Okay? I have been known to add a few drops of essential oil to water I'm storing long term, but healing-wise, no. And we've done some harsh things around here, and so far, rubbing that oil on the body, diluted in a carrier oil, has taken care of everything I've ever asked it to do. And it is so much safer, especially with children. I just wouldn't internally use an oil for healing purposes at all. Finish up one more time, although we've said it before, essential oils are antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. I had occasion here 3 years ago to teach in Oregon at a midwife convention. And of course, all the midwives wanted their training. They wanted hours for the classes they took for their licensing and their training. So I had to do many months worth of research into the latest research on essential oils. Fascinating books have been published on that. There are thousands of studies on essential oils indicating their properties. And particularly this one, the antiviral, antifungal, anti-everything properties of essential oils. So don't let anybody tell you that this doesn't work. The science is behind it, and it really and truly does. I want to close with just one anecdotal story. Years ago, I took some classes, and I wanted to take my computer with me, and the teacher seriously objected to that. She just knew it was going to destroy everybody's energy systems and their immune systems and everything else. And so, since it was a class on energy and they were muscle testing, I challenged her to test my muscle, have someone walk towards me with my computer screen, and see how close I could get to it before it affected me negatively. Found out she could bury it in my belly, and we all got impatient before the muscle cared one bit or another. So everybody else in the room wanted to try it too. So one by one, they walked across the room with this computer. And we found only one other woman in the room who also could tolerate the computer close by for long periods of time. Everybody else, as soon as it got within range, the muscle in the arm went slack. The only common denominator we could find between her and me was that I spent my life blending essential oils, and she spent her life massaging people using essential oils. And I have found that to be true over the last 17 years. People who use oil become stronger, more resilient to disease. They don't get sick as often. And they heal faster. As I move around among people and listen to their descriptions of the latest bug that goes by and realize that, oh, my throat was a little scratchy one morning, so I put turmoil on my feet and deliverance on my chest, and that was the last I heard of it. Just so many, to me, essential oils are positively amazing. The more I study them and the longer I use them, the more I love them. Well, thank you for letting me have the opportunity. There's nothing I like better than talking about essential oils and herbs and other things. I have written a series of books. They came about kind of oddly. Mostly I write things so that it clarifies my own mind, and then my husband runs around and publishes them until he finally made me put them in some kind of order. If you will go to the site butterflyexpressions.net, there will be a list of the classes we teach, the books that we do. We have in our facility a large teaching room and lots of extra bedrooms and a kitchen and accommodations for you to stay. Or you can just call 208-747-3021 and ask for Gina, and she will set you straight, or anybody that answers will be fine. They will provide you whatever information you need. Thank you.